Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Imagine for a moment that one of the most overlooked nations on the planet had quietly been assembling something capable of shaking the very foundations of global influence. Picture hearing that a country long seen as a developing state had secretly pushed its nuclear strength to a level that even the United States never truly foresaw. Today we dive into a revelation that left Washington stunned, unsettled, and scrambling to understand what exactly had unfolded. This was the moment the international community finally realized the full extent of India's hidden nuclear capability. The revelation didn't surface gradually, it hit like a sudden lightning strike. Intelligence assessments that for years had downplayed India's progress suddenly presented a radically different and far more alarming portrait. India was not simply maintaining a small deterrent aimed at Pakistan or China. Not at all. India had been quietly building a highly advanced, diversified, and remarkably sophisticated nuclear arsenal that very few outside its most secure inner circles ever imagined was within reach. Far out in barren deserts, deep inside remote mountain ranges, and silently beneath the ocean's depths, India had been preparing for a world where nuclear strength represented survival, leverage, and undeniable global respect. And when the United States finally realized the magnitude of what had been assembled, the shockwaves were immediate. But before we break down what India created and why America found itself unprepared, we must step back and understand the long path that led India to this turning point. Because to fully appreciate this moment, we must revisit a history defined by secrecy, resilience, and the unshakable determination to never again be vulnerable or underrated. India's nuclear journey began not from a desire for dominance, but from a fundamental necessity to protect itself. After independence in 1947, the nation confronted a series of harsh and unforgiving realities: partition, widespread bloodshed, economic struggles, and continuous threats from hostile neighbors shaped the early decades of the Republic. When China unexpectedly tested its first nuclear device in 1964, it sent tremors through New Delhi and became a watershed moment for Indian leadership, especially Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. It became crystal clear that India could not rely solely on alliances, diplomacy, or moral principles for its security. The world respected strength, and during the Cold War era, the highest measure of power was nuclear capability. So in 1974, India shocked the world with its first nuclear test, famously known as Smiling Buddha. Although New Delhi described it as a peaceful nuclear explosion intended for scientific purposes, the test greatly unsettled both Washington and Beijing. After the detonation, India essentially went underground, both literally and symbolically. Western nations imposed sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and varying degrees of isolation. But instead of surrendering to that pressure, India became even more resolute. Over the following decades, India developed what became known as strategic ambiguity. Outwardly, it spoke of peace, restraint, and stability. But quietly, it gathered knowledge, fortified its technological base, and expanded its capabilities step by meticulous step. The 1999 Kargil conflict, fought under the shadow of nuclear weapons between India and Pakistan, proved that India's deterrent was not merely symbolic, it carried real and powerful consequences. Yet throughout the 2000s and 2010s, major think tanks and intelligence agencies consistently underestimated India's advancement. They assumed India only possessed a small collection of warheads, slow and outdated missile delivery systems, and a conservative nuclear doctrine. They believed India could never come close to matching China or the United States. But that is exactly where the story takes a completely unexpected turn. As recently uncovered by US intelligence, all those assumptions turned out to be completely inaccurate. Hidden under the sands of Rajasthan, inside secure naval bases in the Andaman Islands, and deep within reinforced mountain complexes, India had quietly constructed a fully developed nuclear triad: land, air, and sea-based nuclear capabilities that ensured India could retaliate forcefully even if struck first. What shocked intelligence analysts even further was the realization that India had been developing missile systems capable of reaching far beyond its immediate region, not just Beijing or Islamabad, but much farther. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles, hypersonic technologies, and compact yet extraordinarily powerful warheads had been tested, refined, and perfected far away from public scrutiny. This was not the India that many Western nations believed they understood. This was not the compliant, predictable ally Washington assumed it could depend on without question. This was a transformed India, bold, confident, and unwilling to stay on the sidelines of global power any longer. So the question emerges, why hide all of this for so many years, and why disclose it now? The answer lies in a deliberate long-term strategy. By keeping its advancements hidden, India avoided severe sanctions, trade restrictions, and widespread global suspicion. It maintained productive partnerships with Western nations, accessed advanced technologies, and at the same time strengthened itself discreetly. Then, when the moment was right, through selective disclosures, carefully timed announcements, or unmistakable demonstrations, the world was confronted with a new reality. India had risen as an unmistakable nuclear heavyweight. Now imagine what unfolded inside the White House Situation Room when this intelligence reached Washington. Picture the stunned expressions among American officials as satellite images revealed newly built Indian missile silos. Visualize their disbelief as intelligence reports confirmed that Indian submarines armed with long-range nuclear missiles were quietly patrolling the Indian Ocean. For decades, the United States believed it had a complete understanding of the global strategic environment. But suddenly, it recognized that a powerful new force had emerged, one fully capable of altering the balance. This realization triggered immediate concern and deep strategic debate. Washington was forced to confront uncomfortable questions. Could the US still treat India as a junior partner in efforts to counter China? Or had India now placed itself firmly as an independent power center that refused to be directed by any foreign nation? What would this mean for alliances, for NATO's long-term calculus, for Asia's entire geopolitical structure? The shock intensified when intelligence leaders recognized the deeper truth behind the discovery. This wasn't merely about India's rapid advancement, it highlighted a monumental American oversight. For decades, the world's most advanced intelligence network had failed to spot one of the most significant geopolitical developments of the modern era. The revelation symbolized India's rise, but it also exposed America's overconfidence. It served as a powerful reminder that global power is not always held by those who speak the loudest, but often by those who move quietly, steadily, and with long-range vision. As the narrative progresses, it becomes essential to understand not only what India built, but how it succeeded in doing all of this without detection by satellites, foreign operatives, and global surveillance networks. The deeper this investigation goes, the clearer it becomes that the existing international power framework may be shifting dramatically. To understand how the US was caught off guard, we must examine long-standing assumptions. America has long believed it holds unmatched intelligence capabilities. Its satellites orbit nearly every part of the planet, its listening devices lie deep beneath the oceans, and its intelligence agents operate across continents. Agencies such as the CIA, NSA, and Pentagon take immense pride in their reach. Yet somehow, India expanded its nuclear and missile programs right under their observation. How could this happen? The truth is that the United States committed one of its most significant strategic miscalculations. It underestimated India. For years, Washington viewed New Delhi as a friendly democracy, a practical partner against China, and a lucrative market for American industries. This mindset made American analysts complacent. They assumed India would never cross the invisible boundaries the West had quietly set. They believed India would always seek Western approval and remain comfortably within the traditional role assigned to it. This arrogance turned into neglect. While the US was preoccupied with conflicts in the Middle East, managing tensions with Russia, and attempting to outpace China, India advanced in silence. India made use of its scientific talent, rapidly expanding tech sector, and growing economic strength to build nuclear capabilities beneath multiple layers of disguise. Projects that appeared to be focused on space research or civilian energy frequently carried dual military potential. When India launched satellites, the world applauded its scientific achievements. But behind the scenes, the very same technologies were being adapted for long-range missile guidance. When new nuclear reactors were inaugurated, the official narrative emphasized clean energy and development, while ongoing research quietly moved forward on warhead miniaturization and plutonium processing, steps that would prove critical in building powerful yet compact nuclear weapons capable of fitting into advanced missile systems. And then there was the Indian Ocean. For decades, Western navies concentrated their focus on the Atlantic, Pacific, and South China Sea. Very few paid meaningful attention to the Indian Ocean, which naturally fell within India's own strategic domain. This provided India the ideal environment to develop its most guarded secret nuclear-armed submarines capable of launching long-range ballistic missiles. These underwater platforms, stealthy, elusive, and constantly shifting positions, granted India a credible second strike capability, something only a select number of nations have managed to achieve. Even if an adversary launched a devastating first blow, India would still retain the ability to respond with overwhelming force. This single factor altered India's nuclear posture permanently. Now let us examine regional reactions. Pakistan's initial response was pure alarm. With an unstable economy, political volatility, and deep dependence on external patrons, Pakistan suddenly realized that its nuclear deterrent no longer aligned with India's expanding capabilities. India had not merely surpassed Pakistan. It had moved so far ahead that Pakistan would remain years, possibly decades behind. China's reaction was more layered. On one hand, Beijing was deeply irritated. For decades, it believed it held uncontested dominance in Asia, challenged only by the United States. Suddenly, India demonstrated the capacity to strike deep into Chinese territory from the Tibetan Plateau all the way to Beijing, and even to major economic hubs like Shanghai. This revelation forced Beijing to reassess the regional balance and India's rapidly growing strategic influence. India's expanding naval footprint also posed a threat to China's trade lifelines and its Belt and Road ambitions across the Indian Ocean. Yet China understood that open confrontation could backfire. Beijing recognized that India's rise could not be dismissed, yet it was equally clear that India could not be easily contained. China now faced a rival unlike any it had encountered before, one that had mastered the art of discretion and strategic surprise. For the United States, the consequences were even more profound. The realization that another democracy once viewed as a junior partner had outmaneuvered Western intelligence infrastructure in multiple ways was a difficult truth to digest. It compelled Washington to reevaluate long-standing assumptions about global authority, alliances, and the distribution of influence. This revelation did more than shift military calculations. It reshaped how the world perceived India. No longer a quiet observer, India had carved out its position as a formidable independent global actor, capable of shaping the 21st century on its own terms. As the world observes this transformation, a single question echoes louder than ever. Has India quietly rewritten the global power playbook? Beijing chose a path marked by rapid military expansion, assertive diplomacy, and covert cyber operations aimed at exposing India's hidden capabilities, as well as the strategies of the United States. Meanwhile, the real shockwave struck Washington. One can imagine the tension behind those sealed doors. Military strategists were forced to overhaul plans almost instantly. Politicians long advocating stronger ties with India suddenly faced unsettling questions. Had the US, by granting India access to civilian nuclear technology through the 2008 nuclear deal and by collaborating on space and defense programs, inadvertently enabled a quiet surge in India's strategic leverage? The truth was uncomfortable. America had treated India as a trusted ally, yet India had used that trust to reinforce its sovereignty and prepare for uncertain times ahead. In Washington, surprise quickly shifted into unease, and unease transformed into a frantic search for answers. Yet the deeper narrative extended far beyond weapon systems. It was about dignity, self-definition, and strategic influence. For decades, India had been classified as emerging or developing, always climbing but never fully acknowledged as reaching the summit. Western nations repeatedly shifted the benchmarks, never completely recognizing India as a true global authority. This discreet, sudden revelation became India's way of declaring, we are no longer emerging, we are present fully, and we will no longer ask for permission to sit at the table, we will claim our place ourselves. This assertion sent shockwaves through America's power circles more than anything else. The United States was not accustomed to losing control over a global narrative, yet India, through meticulous planning, patience, and quiet determination, had seized control of its own destiny. The implications of this turning point are immense. First is the global political recalibration. Across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, countries are reconsidering India's role. Nations fatigued by Western dominance increasingly view India as a new model. A nation that resisted pressure pursued its own route and emerged stronger than anticipated. This greatly enhances India's stature among the countries of the global south. Next comes the question of nuclear doctrine. India's long-standing no-first-use policy now faces deeper examination. With advanced technology and strengthened nuclear capabilities, will India maintain its traditional restraint, or has it developed these assets to enable a more flexible strategic stance? Both the United States and China now analyze every official statement and military movement from New Delhi with heightened vigilance. Economic influence forms another layer. Power naturally expands economic reach. Suddenly, American tech firms, European defense contractors, and investors from the Middle East recognize that overlooking India is no longer an option. A nuclear-empowered India becomes an economic magnet, attracting trade partnerships, investment, and strategic collaborations. Global institutions too feel the shift. The United Nations, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and other international frameworks increasingly appear outdated. India, never a signatory to the NPT, has demonstrated that genuine global influence arises not from written agreements, but from tangible strength and self-sufficiency. The critical question now is, what comes next? Will India unveil more of its concealed capabilities? Will it publicly reveal advanced hypersonic weapons or sophisticated defense systems capable of rivaling those of the United States? Will it firmly demand a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, placing itself beside America, Russia, and China? Or will it continue to operate quietly, leveraging its growing strength to subtly shape global policies from the background, fully aware that it can no longer be ignored? One thing is certain, the shock in Washington has permanently transformed American perceptions of India. Once a dependable partner, India is now viewed both as an ally and a potential competitor, a friend when interests align, and a challenger when influence and power are in question. This duality will shape the future of US-India relations for years to come. Beneath all this lies a deeper truth that America may not state openly but understands instinctively. India's rise was never a sudden surprise. It was inevitable. A civilization of more than 1.4 billion people with thousands of years of heritage, extraordinary talent, and enduring resilience was never destined to remain permanently labeled as developing. Its ascent was certain. The only uncertainty was timing. The world now has its answer. This revelation surpasses nuclear weapons or missile expertise. It is a story of transformation, identity, and destiny. It tells the journey of a nation that waited, endured, and finally stood tall. What lessons can be drawn from this dramatic sequence of events and America's astonishment at India's hidden nuclear capabilities? First, it is a lesson in underestimation. For far too long, India was underestimated by nearly everyone. Experts predicted that it would remain constrained, dependent, and unable to redefine global frameworks. Yet India transformed that underestimation into its greatest advantage. By remaining underestimated, it stayed unnoticed. By staying unnoticed, it quietly gathered the power to surprise the world at precisely the right moment. Second, this moment reveals the limits of American intelligence and global oversight. If the United States, equipped with satellite surveillance networks and worldwide reach, could overlook such a significant development, what else might be eluding its attention, which other countries may be preparing their own strategic surprises? The myth of America's all-knowing reach has been challenged, and that shift changes how the world views Washington's authority. It introduces uncertainty, a recognition that even the most powerful nation on Earth can be taken off guard. Finally, it speaks profoundly about India itself. This story was never only about weapons or deterrence, it was a declaration of identity. For centuries, India had been colonized, exploited, and undervalued. Today it stands as a self-assured, independent, and powerful nation, prepared to defend its interests, shape international affairs, and insist on respect on the global stage.